Hello, welcome back. Just thought I'd do another story about my crazy life and the background on this one. We were going to a work camp. Well, me and some boys, we got into a discussion about whether ghosts are alive. So someone came up with the wonderful idea that we should just all go to the cemetery and see if we could find some. And one of these guys was my boyfriend, so he shows up on my doorstep one night and says, "Let's go." And I'm going to read this because I think I can do it a little better than talking it out. So Dan, too, my boyfriend, Ray, and Jake show up at my door one chill autumn evening when the leaves are just starting to turn colors. "Hey, buddy, we're all here ready to go to the cemetery," Dan says engagingly with a silly grin on his face. I sigh and grab a sweatshirt. Mom harasses us, but Dan, too, tells her he's just joking, and we're actually all going to a restaurant. I thought he was joking, too, and so we get to his Jeep, and then he makes this announcement that, "Oh, well, we're actually going to go to the cemetery first and then to the restaurant." I got this wretched gut feeling, and it returned that was even worse than when we were discussing it back on the work camp trip. So Dan, too, starts talking about the perfect place that we can go to get into the cemetery that he scoped out earlier in the day. And he's like, "And you follow this path through the woods and past this creek to a field. And on the other side of the field is a barbed wire fence. But don't worry, it's bent in places. So all we need to do is go through the fence and we'll be on the other far side of the cemetery." And I'm like, oh, goody. But he's not going to be put off. He's like, "Do you have any words of encouragement or advice for Leah before we get there?" And I'm like, "You mean last words?" Because I'm starting to feel like I've got bile that's threatening to come up. I sigh again, and because I know this is going to be bad, I say, "Okay, listen up. I told Dan this earlier, but I want to make sure everyone aware that what we are going to do can be really dangerous, because normally people don't run around in the cemetery at the night, so the spirits are probably going to try and come over and try and figure out what we're up to. Do not talk to them or acknowledge them, because if they know that you can hear them, they might just start to mess with you." "Why would they do that?" asked Jake. Because there isn't much else to do except hang out and bother living people who come in, They probably get bored," I say. You seem to know a lot about them, Leah. Have you done this before?" Jake asked me. "Well, of course not," I scold him. "I'm not usually that stupid," but I accepted Dan's challenge, so here we are against my better judgments. And there was silence between everybody. Dan, too, turns the radio on and starts singing, of course. And then all too soon, we arrive at the spot. It's dark. There are trees and shadows everywhere, and even though the full moon is out, you can kind of barely see it through the trees. So we're in this dirt parking lot, and then Dan, too, points out to this wide cut dirt path in the dark woods. He's like, "There it is. Does anybody want to back out?" The other guys, Jake and Ray, and they're like, "No," and I just shrug. "It's your funeral," I say resignedly, and hop out of the Jeep. Everyone else peers at me uncertainly from the windows inside. We stare at each other for a moment. "Well, are you coming or not?" I finally ask. They all slowly clamber out of the Jeep to join me. "Ladies first," Jake offers as he points at the path. "Thanks," I say sarcastically, and grab Dan 2's hand. "Oh, well, I thought I could ring up the rear," says Dan 2. "No," I say, "you get to show us where to go, unless you're afraid." He's like, "No way, buddy, I'll bravely lead the way," he says with some flair, and he's wandering like this. So then we start walking. I stretch out my senses, which just means I think about what's kind of lying ahead on the path, just kind of sense it, imagine that I can see it. And it seems like really clear, and nothing's even out there until like about almost 10 minutes later, maybe less, felt like 10 minutes, and all of a sudden I start hearing this thumping noise. It's like a bass line. It's like, and Dan starts asking, "Well, does anybody else hear that funky beat?" And Jake and I do, but the last guy, Ray, he's just shaking his head. He thinks we're all nuts. But I know that song. It's Holding Out for a Hero, I say. And Dad's like, well, where do you think it's coming from? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe from a house that's somewhere nearby. But he's like, well, wait, out here in the woods? Come on. I'm like, oh, gosh. Angel of Death's probably messing with us, probably messing with me again. So we keep walking, and then I sensed it, something really evil down towards where I could hear this creek dribbling around, like off the path to the left. And it does not feel like a ghost. It feels like hungry, huge, very much aware of us, and suddenly it's excited. And it starts moving away from the creek and somewhere onto the path right in front of us. And it's just stopping there, waiting. And I'm like, oh, crap. It's dreadfully eager and lethal, anticipating stuff. And suddenly I feel like it's salivating. I'm like, oh, no. What am I supposed to do? I'm with these guys. And the song, the beat starts getting louder, and then you start hearing dun 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 dun, you know, like in the beginning when it goes. And then suddenly, my boyfriend Antonio, he like falters and stops and turns and looks at me, and he's like, buddy, do you sense anything? And I'm like what? And he says, like, something evil just planted itself along the path in front of us and is now sitting there waiting for lunch to come walking by. And I'm like, oh, double crap. Like, because I'm thinking if he feels it, then I'm not just imagining it. We really are about to die. And then Jake's standing behind us, and he's something like, what is that? And I'm like, what do you sense? And he's like, I don't know. And he starts to turn pale. He's like, but I'm not waiting around to find out. I'm not going another step. And I'm like, smart man. And Ray snarls behind us, well, I'm not scared. You guys are all just making this up to tease me. I know it. I'm like, fine, Mr. Smart Man. If you're feeling so brave, why don't you come up here and lead the way for a little bit? Well, I'll follow you. And Jake's like, no, not me. I'm staying right here. You cannot make me go a step further. And he starts shaking. I mean, you could just see him shaking like this. I'm like, fine, whatever. Like, stay right there. I said, well, go on ahead a little ways, but it's safer to stay together, so don't move unless you hear screaming. If you hear a scream, run back to the Jeep as fast as you can and don't look back. And Jake's like, well, good, that'll do me. I don't even have keys to the car. And then all of a sudden, everybody starts shivering. Dan's like, is it just me, or did everything just turn gray and creepy? I'm like nodding, like, And he's like, and Leah, did you turn up your Walkman? That song is way too loud. I'm like, I do not have my Walkman. This is like an old radio people used to hang out on to walk around with. And I'm like staring around in the dark. Everything's dead. And there's a dark veil that seems to be obscuring the moon. And I can tell death is nearby. So I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, so are you ready to lead? I asked Ray, and he nods. He shows past everybody, goes to the front, starts walking. I take one step, but I don't hear the other guys moving behind me. I take a second step and look back as fear just sliced through me like a jagged knife. No one has moved yet. They're terrified. I took one more step, and then I felt God root my feet to the ground. I can't move forward. But I smell something that's like more horrible than garbage. And then I just had this flash in my head of the original memory of what originally happened. We walked into this small clearing, stared up this tall, strange creature that had stepped out in front of us on the path. It has an animal skull and antlers on its head. And then it has glowing red eyes, which follow our every movement with malice. It's got these animal skins that it was covered in with like little bits of flesh clinging off of them, and it hasn't bothered to cure the hide, so it stinks something off of like decaying flesh almost, or like dead fish. I don't know. It also has huge hand-like appendages that end in 4-inch claws, and where its feet would be, they're like deer hooves, unless it's I was wondering if it was wearing these like weird looking deer boots, like people might when they're camouflaging or something. I had no idea. The only thing I can think of is maybe a satyr, one of those creatures. But before we even have time to figure out what the thing's supposed to be, it takes its claws all across our necks, killing us in mere seconds. No one even has time to scream. And then it pulls the skull kind of like off its head and starts chewing on us. Ugh. So I flash back to what's going on, and I realize that I'm still alive. I see Ray spin around, turn pale. He starts sweating, and he stares at us like this. He's like, something's out there. It's starting to come towards us. Up ahead on the path, I can feel it. And I'm like, so you don't believe in ghosts now, or you want to continue? He's like, I believe in ghosts. At this moment, I hear, that part of the song, and I need a hero. And it's like, somewhere out through midnight in my wildest dream, and then it's like, no, I need a hero, and then Death just like shows up. He's like, you rang, and I'm like, nope, you can go away right now. Do not need you. And suddenly he turns into this tabby cat with a pirate hat and boots and a rapier, and he goes, go, your lady needs you, go. He says that's Dan too, and then he glides off, and I'm like, run. And we are already running, and we all beat it back up the trail. Our fear is consuming us. And Dan too, he's like, what the heck just happened? You sounded like you were on recording, like, he's like, nobody can speak that fast. And I realized that Death had slowed down time so that we could talk for a second. But we're running. Ray is like, whimpering, and Jake is just like, what the heck is about that cat? Who saw the cat? And, I'm trying not to even speak, and we're running, and then all of a sudden I'm out of my body because I'm starting to slow down, and I'm like, Todd, please do not let go of me. We're flying around, and then I was back in my body, and my spirit is linking up with this evil ancient thing, and I can just see what it sees, and it's chasing us on the trail. So I'm like, got, double vision going on, where I can kind of see where I'm going, and I can kind of see that, and I've got Death making snarky comments and doing impressions from, Jurassic Park, where he's saying, must go faster, when the dinosaur's about to chomp on them when they're in the car. And I'm like, okay, and we finally make it out back, and I feel this thing just kind of stop, and it's kind of out of breath and grumbling to itself, and oh my gosh, and Death is just like right there saying, he's like, you owe me for helping out, because he kind of went and distracted the thing for us so that we could get a head start running. And Jake is just, he just wants to know all about Death. He can see him. And that's just, he's like, you owe me. And I was clasping my hands together to this little person. I'm like, oh, my hero, and I blew him back a kiss because I'm snarky that way too. And he's like, I don't even want to think about that. He's like, I'm going to hold you to that, princess. And I'm like, okay, fine. You can have your kiss after I die on the cheek, as long as God agrees. And so then Jake's just like, okay, tell me about the cat. And he's like, what? And he's like, wait, Shrek 2? He's like, what is that? I'm like, probably a sequel to Shrek 1, probably some kind of movie that we hadn't seen it yet. It didn't come out till later. And in the meantime, Dan too is looking for his keys, and he can't find them. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go back and take a look for him. And Jake's like, are you gonna go looking out there all by yourself? Are you crazy. And then all of a sudden the air starts to change and everything starts to turn gray. And I start to sense this creature again, and it like turns around and it sniffs the air for the smell of death, which is like, you know, a dead mouse that's been lying there for a while. And then it grins and it starts coming after us again up the path. And luckily, Dantu found his keys at like the last second. We're all able to get into the car, but I can still feel it coming, and he won't go. You know how you're just sitting there, like, and you can feel something coming. I'm like, gotta go now. And he's like, safety first, we gotta buckle up. And I'm like, we're gonna go. And he's like, it's like, and he's like, okay. And he's looking up and down the road, and it's getting closer and closer and closer. And he finally starts to go. As he starts to turn, the creature just grabbed the back of the van to try and flip it over. And we heard this thump and this scratching noise. And then I saw it kind of rolling off and wander off down the way. But 3 days later, Dan's father got really angry because there was all these scratches on the back of the car. And he's like, I took it into the station, the place, and the guy was working there for 24 years, and he's like, in all my years, I've never seen anything like this. It's almost as if somebody backed into a bush repeatedly, like 5 or 6 times, because, you know, the claw marks were just scratched all around the back. And I mean, this creature must have been over 9 feet tall to have gotten like that many scratches, because you could see where it tried to get in on the other side too. And it was just so freaky. I'm like, I should have died, but I didn't. God save me again. So anyway, if you like my stories, go ahead, subscribe or like, and I'll go ahead and read another one of these days, because I've got a whole bunch. And it's just my crazy life. So hope you guys enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time.